All right, so Walt is not joining us, finds theology boring, and Ermi also is not joining us, so here we are alone in the dark, in prayer, as in a monastery, thinking about deep thoughts, and we're going to finish this presentation about this magnificent book of Deirdre Carabine about John Scottus' Eriugena, which is gonna be like a springboard for the analysis that we are going to be making of the whole of the Periphysium, which is going to take us a long time because I want to study everything around the periphery of this work. Neoplatonism, early Christianity, Latin fathers, church fathers of the Greek, the eastern side of things in early Christianity, and also what the hell is going on with all the esoteric origins of the disciplines that will fructify later in the Renaissance. I, for my part, at this point, and yes, you may call it out of ignorance perhaps, not so much ignorance, but actually genuine nescience, in the sense that I am really ready not to be ignorant about these issues because I have realized their importance. But at the same time, I refuse to just simply channel on just one perspective. And I want to explore it all and see the value in it all. I am very clear about certain things when it comes to modern life and what we need and why we are in this, why do we live in the state of slavery in which we live. Yeah, you may call it other softer things, but basically it comes to that. It comes down to slavery, a very pernicious way of slavery that, if perhaps not so much in the body, in the sense that we are not being suppressed, or at least not the majority of us, at least not the majority of us in the Western world, in a way that is purely physical, in terms of not all of us are being beaten up or, put into concentration camps and things like that. Yeah, that is at this point still not happening. It doesn't mean it will never happen. I think we're going towards that. But in terms of what it means for the disintegration of the soul, which is absolutely fundamental to understand the disintegration of the mind and the consequences of what we do ourselves to our lives. Yeah, it all comes down to mind control, and that mind control leaves the destructive process to us to inflict it into ourselves, without the real perpetrators having to do too much of the actual muscle work in order to achieve that. Of course, they do that as well, yeah. But if they're going to assume total control, it is much better to do it with the participation of the victim, with some sort of weird Stockholm syndrome. Yeah, we are all being hijacked into this system, and I want to delve deep into that. And also, in the legal system is absolutely essential to understand what I just said. Of course, this doesn't mean that intrinsically, so this is not just like a vague complaint. This is just a reflection of reality. I am not complaining. I'm just simply stating facts. And I'm going to develop as to why that is true. Yeah. Because ultimately, obviously, we should not consider ourselves in our essence as slaves. The problem is when they make you believe that that is so, when they make you believe that you have no options. You always have options, And the reason why I'm exploring Christianity is because even if only archetypically Jesus Christ is actually a great example of the actual complete and utter defeat in this life that represents a complete and actual transformation into the real world and the consciousness of the whole of the conscious beings that have been born on earth since then. Yeah. So in that regard, I find it, you tell me if there's something that is more profound and I might convert to that, but I don't think so. Yeah. So that's why I'm exploring this, and I'm going to explore it from many angles as it corresponds from someone who's not an expert. I want to get extensively and deeply into this, but not from the point of view of someone who might have been studying this stuff for 20 years, becomes an expert, and finally resolves to bring the information forth. What I am actually doing is present you with the struggle of coming across this information from a very clear perspective in other areas. However, as the magma of this information that is underlying all the things that I'm clear about, honestly not really being an expert on what we could call medieval Christian philosophy, the first millennia of Christianity. I don't think many people actually know what they're talking about when they talk about these themes. And it's certainly not me who is going to come from the perspective of being an expert. My recommendation will actually be that you go to the original of this book, that you actually do read the book of Deirdre Carabine. I'm going to write it down here so that you have it very clearly. Okay, this will be her name, if I write it correctly. Deirdre Carabine. That's her name, and the book is just simply called as the name of the philosopher, John Scottus Eriugena. Just to make clear that if you really want to know about this, go to the real expert. She is the real expert. Read the book, get the book, and read it. So, and read the Periphysium. that's not going to be easy. So the concept of deification. Let's go for the reason why I'm talking about this is because I want to give a little bit of context as to why I do this. Doesn't matter what I think about it, but in my channel, obviously, is my channel, is sort of my terrain, is truth terrain. So this is one of the things that I want to delve deep, apart from many other things that are actually contemporary to us. But I think philosophy is very, very important. So, and I will explain why. We're going to get into all those things. So, vision, cloud, and mystical union. The concept of deification, theosis of the elect. So we have been talking about who's going to be the elect, what can be expected from, what kind of theophany the elect are going to have, and what kind of punishment, although their human nature, the intrinsic essential human nature cannot be punished. Yeah, what is it that they're going to be having to deal with from the perspective of having been immoral beings, basically, which is what the only thing that what a sinner could be. Concept of deification, theosis of the elect. Ambrose said, weak eyes cannot hear the brilliance of the light. So weak eyes cannot hear the brilliance of the light. Okay. Eriugena's vision, final vision of God, is it Eastern or Western? So this last chapter, Deirdre Carabine is going to lead us sort of like what kind of philosopher is actually John Scottus Eriugena. Can we put him in a box in terms of Eastern or Western, or is it simply a conciliation of the two, or are we talking about a truly original thinker, despite the fact that he takes from both traditions, which are never really clear cut in the first millennia? Yeah, remember that, yes, there is a Latin part, there is a Greek part, but Christianity was one. Yeah, so this is not easily categorized, and he's not fully dependent on either. So it's a little bit like an Augustinian type of theology, in line with the Greek fathers as well. The basic problem is to reconcile Augustine's conception of the vision of God with the Dionysian assertion God can never be known or seen. Here we go. Number 2. So how then does he resolve the two conflicting traditions? The creation and the manifestation of God can be expressed in cataphatic terms, and the converse movement, the resolution of division and multiplicity, is best approached in apophatic terms. So the conception of the final vision of God can be seen in terms of sight and vision, as Augustine does, and in terms of blindness and darkness, as the pseudo-Dionysius does. It differs, however, from the pseudo-Dionysius in how to unite Latin West with the Greek East, which we're going to see now. This will be number 3. There you go there. So the light symbol equals the procession of the light of the Father in the Word, who illuminates darkness and ignorance. So we have the light metaphor in a positive sense, which expresses the diffusion of all things from causes into created effect. This will be in connection with the fiat lux, let there be light, of Genesis, which is the creation of the primordial causes, which is the transition from darkness to light, from the unknown to the known. So on the one hand, we have this light symbol. Eriugena does refer to transcendence of God as darkness and the vision of God via clouds. So we have the other side of it. So the superlative and privative conceptions of darkness, which would be darkness and ignorance to God and to the human condition, and darkness as the symbolic of the fallen state. So we have the superlative here, where Eriugena refers to darkness as the transcendence of God, but also in the privative sense we can understand it as ignorance and as a symbology for the fallen state. Again, let's go to the next one. Where are we? Number 3. This will be number 4. And number 4 goes here. So the vision promised in the life to come is the vision of God face to face. Eriugena argues that because God is invisible, the essence of God cannot be actually seen. So the vision, therefore, will be mediated through theophany, even for the elect. So as a good Neoplatonist, and this will differ from other fathers of the church, I mean, Eriugena is not a father of the church, okay? It's quite a sort of outside the orthodoxy, shall we say. He did try to stay within the orthodoxy, but it was actually never truly accepted. So this theophany will be, the theophany is the vision of God, but it's not really that you are seeing God or that you are truly within God. So the true God is actually invisible and its essence cannot be seen. So whatever vision comes from theophany, the theophany will be a mediation of that state, of invisibility into a state of visibility where the saint can actually see God in the only way that it can be seen, through theophany. It will be always like there is a veil. No creature except the human nature of the Word can ascend to God without any intervening theophany, although some theophanies are very close to God. Okay, so let's go there. I'm not sure how much of a negative aspect this is. Okay, so the fact that you cannot see it doesn't mean that you are not in it. Human nature participates fully of it. Remember. Mediated visions stand together with Augustine. So it's posing a question here. So Eriugena is resolving, remember, Augustine versus Pseudo-Dionysius. This is kind of like a patristic dialectic here. Eriugena's interpretation of Augustine comments in the City of God, which is through the bodies that we shall put. So we're talking about how he does that, So he makes an interpretation of Augustine's comments in the City of God as such, being those comments, through the bodies that we shall put on in every body we see, wherever we turn the eyes of our body, we shall contemplate with translucent clarity God himself. It means that through bodies in bodies, we shall contemplate God. That is through theophany or mediated vision. So this is the theophany and the resurrection version, in which the body is kind of very ethereal, in nature. So this body is very ethereal. There's other doctrines that assert the body as the actual body as we know it being in that state. Which means, by the way, that the body, there's nothing wrong with the body. There's only something wrong with the fallen state. Which is the lack of good, the lack of knowledge, the lack of connection with the true God. So, the search of God, therefore, will be infinite. The increasing and endless activity of the beatific life is simply seeking God. Eriugena maintains the concept of divine incomprehensibility even when God is all in all. So this theophany would be the cloud of contemplation, the vision that is mediated because of God's invisibility. What is meant here by vision is face to face. Let's get to this quote. But since that which is from Periphyson number 5. But since that which it seeks and towards which it tends is infinite and not to be comprehended by any creature, it necessarily follows that its quest is infinite. And yet, although its search is unending, by some miraculous means it finds what it is seeking for. And again, it does not find it, for it cannot be found. Therefore, even the highest of all theophanies will find only that God is not what God is. I would say, even if you're going to agree with this, I totally agree that you can never know what God is, but you can absolutely know that God is. And it all is all going to depend on what the distance is, the distance that this theophany takes. The theophany as actually really being in God and seeing God, or seeing God from the distance and eternal. I think for both it is eternal, of course. The other question will be, is it going to be a search that is eternal, and the glory of God consists precisely of that? The glory of being connected to God consists precisely of God, or is going to be a final stage that is pure and eternal in essence, but it's a find, not a search. Like an undefinable find. Important, believe it or not. Okay, let's see number 6. Here we go, number 6. Let's just continue with this. The nature of unity with God is smaller. So the Augustinian nature of the unity of God is bigger than the Dionysian one. So Dionysius takes a big distance, even in theophany, and Augustine is very close to God, shall we say, when the theophany happens. But the final consequences of negative theology are as radical as Dionysius and that of Gregory of Nyssa. Okay, so Eriugena is more towards conciliates both, but goes more towards the negative side of it. Eriugena does not center on the experience of the individual soul. This is also important. Eyeless minds, through absolute ecstasy, enter into the cloud of divine darkness to a sightless and knowledgeless unity with the superessential once the sensible and intellectual have been abandoned fully. No one may draw near him who does not first, by preserving in the way of thought, abandon all the senses and the operations of the intellect, together with the sensibles and everything that is and that is not, and having achieved a state of not knowing, is restored to the unity, as far as is possible, of him who is above every essence and understanding. So for Eriugena, the purest form of knowledge of the transcendent God is through theophany, but you can see the nature of this theophany, in which a real merging with the nature of God is not possible, and at its essence is a non-knowing, and is a getting rid of all the senses, all the operations of the intellect. For it is for the very few, wholly detached from earthly thoughts and purged by virtue and knowledge, to know God in these visible creatures. So the knowledge of not knowing. Remember, we've been talking about this in the videos before. So in mystical theology, which is a work of the pseudo-Dionysius, the soul which has thrown itself blindly into the darkness of God is silent in unspeakable unity with God. All human nature has the capacity to transcend sense and reason, and with the assistance of grace be raised into God. Okay, let's get to number 7. 3 to go. So there is also a difference between Eriugena and previous philosophers from the Greek tradition, in that the cloud-weathered summit of Sinai and Moses will be the prototype of the mystical ascent of the soul for Gregory of Nyssa and the pseudo-Dionysius. For Eriugena, the shift happens into the New Testament. It's not the negative theology of Moses, it takes it into the negative theology of John and Paul. So we have that from the cloud of Sinai to the clouds of ascension and transfiguration of the New Testament. That's the context, the biblical context in which Eriugena operates for explaining the return. This sets him apart from the Dionysian tradition, as we say. The final stage of the return of the elect is a return to inaccessible light. Yet, access to the inaccessible is permitted through theophany, that is, the apparition of the unapparent. God is known and seen by not being known or seen. The returned soul knows that God is, not what God is, even in the highest theophanies. Makes sense to me. Doesn't matter what I think, but it does. Anyway, okay, let's go here. Let's not get distracted by anything. Number 8, human spirit can ascend to God through perfect sightlessness. Mystical theology in the pseudo-Dionysius, purified souls, and the purified soul enters into unity with the superessential in darkness, that is the darkness of Sinai. in Gregory of Nyssa, purifying the soul of added soul God. So purifying the soul of added, something missing here, so God can be seen in the mirror of the soul. So the struggle is absent though in Eriugena, which is the image of God restored after the end of time. So in Gregory and the Pseudo-Dionysius, you have all this spiritual discipline in order to get to this stage. It's something that, a work that the soul has to make. With Eriugena, it's a given to which you have to be tuned, of course. In the Periphysium, the restored soul enters into a much populated heavenly court in the darkness over the abyss of Genesis. It refers to the darkness of the abyss in Genesis. So you see the differences between Eriugena and Gregory of Nyssa and the Pseudo-Dionysius. So for the vision of God is obscured through the unworthiness of created natures. The seraphim hide their faces before the brilliance of God's light. In the Periphysium, the return to God in terms of the cosmic adunatio, that is union, atonement also. The whole nature hastening upwards towards its telos, its ultimate end. Eriugena is a cosmic and eschatological philosopher, and that's the way to get into eternal beatitude. After death, or at the end of the world, the contemplation of the truth for the different beings is assured. Great, so now we're going to go to our very last. So Eriugena does not look for an alternative way to God for the individual soul through mystical union. The unknowable remains forever unknowable, even in final theophany when the soul is seeking its end. Because of Eriugena's initial sanctification of creation, there is no need for the soul to look for God, because in a very real sense, the soul is God. So you will have to go more than through a painful search for truth. It will be more of a realization that in essence you are already that truth, or you are already within that truth. It's an eternal discovery. He did not need to envisage a solution to the problem of unity with God. His journey to the transcendent results in diversity within unity, transposing the key from the individual level to the eschatological level, divine invisibility and incomprehensibility to their ultimate conclusions. So he takes divine indivisibility and incomprehensibility to their ultimate conclusions, and the eschatological events that found its inspiration in the events of the Genesis. So we have the Alpha and the Omega being one thing and the same, or one thing talking about the other one about the other, and both talking about the very same thing. And we have finished this presentation about Deirdre Carabine's John Scottus Eriugena, fantastic book. And I really recommend that you read the book. And if you have enjoyed this series, that will make me really glad. I have learned a lot in the process myself, and many questions, so many things are clear and many questions have arisen from it. So thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.